So imagine you're trying to picture the ultimate, like the absolute biggest networking event on the planet.
Right, you're probably thinking of something like the World Economic Forum in Davos, maybe?
Yeah, Davos. Or like a massive tech summit out in Silicon Valley. Or even just some sprawling global expo.
Millions of people from every major industry representing literally every country on Earth, all just converging in one single location.
Exactly. But what if I told you that the oldest, most successful, and honestly most diverse global trade gathering was actually designed primarily as a religious pilgrimage?
It's wild, right? Because it completely shatters this artificial boundary we've built up between the sacred and the commercial.
It really does.
We all just kind of operate under this unspoken assumption that the moment you focus on profit margins or, business, you have inherently stepped away from spiritual purity.
Like they're mutually exclusive or something. Anyway, welcome to the Deep Dive. We are incredibly thrilled to have you with us today.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, today's mission is to explore this truly fascinating lecture by Numan Ali Khan. We sourced this from the ARQAM TV YouTube channel, and the lecture is called What the Quran Says About Money, Trade, and Business.
Right, and he actually delivered this address to a live audience in Malaysia.
We're going to be breaking down part one of this. It's a pretty comprehensive three-part series.
Very comprehensive.
And the goal here is to basically uncover this unexpected economic blueprint hidden right inside a sacred text. And really to demonstrate how the spiritual and material worlds aren't meant to be walled off from one another.
What really stands out immediately in the source material, though, is the lecturer's own apprehension at the start.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he was so nervous.
He really was. He's standing in front of this massive live audience, and he explicitly warns them that the sheer density of the macroeconomic concepts he's about to cover, well, it wouldn't be entertaining.
I think he literally joked that it might put them to sleep.
Yeah, he did. Because, he usually zeroes in on much narrower, more traditionally theological topics.
Right.
But while he playfully joked about putting people to sleep, the actual concepts he presents are, they're incredibly awakening.
Wait, awakening how?
Well, if you really engage with the framework he's pulling from the text, it doesn't induce sleep at all. It completely reorganizes your understanding of, supply chains, market stability, even your daily commute.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to understand this whole awakening thing, we first have to understand the specific blinders that the lecturer argues most people are walking around wearing.
The two lenses.
Right, exactly. He asserts that people typically view religious texts, the Quran included, through only two very narrow lenses, and those are Aqidah and Fiqh.
And this is really the crux of the problem he's diagnosing right out of the gate.
So break down those terms for us real quick.
Sure. So when you only read a text looking for theology, that's Aqidah. So the unseen, the afterlife, the nature of God.
Okay.
Or you only read it looking for legalistic rulings and ritual mechanics, that's Fiqh. When you do that, you inevitably fracture your reality.
You create a divide.
A stark, totally artificial divide between deen, which is religion, and dunya, which is the worldly life.
Right. It's like you put your life into these strict password-protected folders on your computer.
That's a great way to put it.
You've got one folder labeled mosque, filled with your Aqidah and Fiqh, and then another folder labeled money, filled with your career, your investments, your dunya.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely zero cloud syncing happening between the two. The files never interact.
Never. And the psychological dissonance this creates is just staggering.
He gave a pretty intense example of this, didn't he?
He did. He illustrates this with a scenario of a person who is just hyper-vigilant about their rituals. This person never misses Taraweeh prayers during Ramadan. They perform Hajj annually. They've memorized the entire Quran.
So on paper, they're the perfect believer.
By the purely ritualistic metrics of Fiqh, they are elite.
Right.
Yet this same individual categorically refuses to give his sister her rightful inheritance. Or, say they're navigating a divorce and this person becomes totally vindictive and ruthless. They just entirely ignore the ethical mandates for fairness that literally exist within the very texts they've memorized.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here a little bit.
Go for it.
It's one thing to say someone is hypocritical. We all know people like that. But how does someone literally recite the specific verses regarding inheritance or divorce law during their prayers, and then walk right out of the room and steal from their sister?
It's baffling, I know.
That level of cognitive dissonance seems almost sociopathic to me, not just a casual blind spot.
What's fascinating here, though, is that it's actually a completely predictable feature of human psychology, not necessarily sociopathy.
Really? How so?
Well, human beings crave the completion of checklists.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Rituals provide a definitive, quantifiable checkbox. You completed the prayer, check. You fasted the month, check.
And you get that little dopamine hit of righteousness.
Exactly. But economic ethics, navigating the nuances of a business partnership, executing a fair divorce, dividing inheritance equitably, these do not offer easy checkboxes.
They're messy.
They require continuous, messy, exhausting moral navigation. There's no real finish line for being ethical in business.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's an ongoing process.
So the brain compartmentalizes. It focuses heavily on the ritual to secure the feeling of piety while completely walling off the messy economic reality.
So the core argument he's making is that the Quran does not recognize this wall at all. It refuses to let you just stay safely inside that ritual folder.
Exactly. It treats the boardroom and the prayer rat as existing on the exact same coordinate plane.
Which is a huge shift in perspective.
It is. And this demands that you, as the listener, have to evaluate your own operational framework. Like, do you maintain a cutthroat, it's just business persona during the work week, only to suddenly don a moral, family-oriented persona on the weekend?
Right, because the text is arguing that this compartmentalization is a fundamental corruption of human purpose. And that sets up our first major paradigm shift. If the text demands we merge these worlds, how does it handle the raw materials of the dunya?
This is where the lecture gets really interesting. He pivots to how the Quran discusses natural resources, so rain, vegetation, livestock.
And he doesn't treat these verses as just like simple pastoral poetry about nature.
Not at all. He frames them as deeply, fundamentally economic. He introduces a really critical vocabulary term here, risk. While it's commonly translated as just provision, he splits it into its spiritual and literal manifestations.
So what's the difference?
Well, spiritual risk might be guidance or finding a brilliant mentor, but literal risk is the actual tangible protein and carbohydrates sitting on your dining table.
Oh, I loved how he proved this to the audience. He actually polled the crowd right there in the lecture, asking who had already eaten dinner.
Yeah, that was a great moment.
And he used that to trace the reality of their meal. He pointed out that whether you ate a steak or a salad, its existence was entirely predicated on rain.
Which seems obvious at first.
Right. On the surface, rain makes food grow. Feels like a fairly basic, almost elementary observation. Where is the deep insight there?
The insight isn't in the biology of agriculture, it's in the macroeconomic fragility that the text is highlighting.
Okay, unpack that.
He's asking the audience to view weather patterns as the absolute baseline of the global supply chain. When a single drop of rain falls, it initiates this massive interconnected chain of commerce.
Right, the soil absorbs it, the crop grows.
The livestock consumes the crop, the livestock is processed, packaged, and injected into a sprawling transit network.
He used a wildly modern example for this, which blew my mind. He talked about Qatar.
Oh, the cows.
Yes, the cows. Qatar is a desert, right? It obviously doesn't have rolling green pastures for dairy cows.
Right.
So to secure their literal risk, their literal provision, they have flown hundreds of thousands of cows and poultry into the country on massive cargo planes.
It's unbelievable when you think about it.
Think about the logistics of that for just a second. We aren't just talking about pushing some cows onto a plane.
No, the infrastructure required is insane.
You have to import the aviation fuel. You have to build these massive climate-controlled agricultural facilities right in the middle of a desert.
And you have to fly in the specific feed required to keep those cows alive.
And power massive desalination plants just to provide them with fresh drinking water.
And that extreme example perfectly illustrates why the Quran's frequent mentions of clouds and rain are actually economic statements.
It's not just, look at the pretty clouds.
Exactly. It's describing the ultimate butterfly effect. The text acknowledges that a shift in weather patterns in one hemisphere dictates global power dynamics in another.
Geopolitics.
Right. The lecturer specifically points to the geopolitical tension between India and Pakistan over water rights. Water controls agriculture, agriculture controls imports and exports dictate national sovereignty.
He gave this brilliant homework assignment during the lecture that I think everyone listening should try. I actually did it myself.
Oh, the ChatGPT one.
Yes. He said, go to ChatGPT and ask it to explain how rain impacts the global economy. Don't prompt it with anything religious at all. Just ask about the raw economics.
Then what happened?
I did this. And it spits out this incredibly complex web detailing futures markets, shipping lane costs, localized energy production grids, and commodity pricing.
Wow.
It completely reframes ancient verses about clouds from simple poetry into this highly sophisticated acknowledgement of market dependency. It reads like a modern CEO sweating over a fragile global supply chain.
That is so cool. It really forces the realization that every time you swipe your credit card at a grocery store, that's merely the final localized action of a sprawling global apparatus.
An apparatus that remains entirely dependent on natural phenomena completely outside of human control.
Exactly. And once that risk, that raw provision is generated, it obviously has to be moved and developed.
Right, which transitions the lecture heavily into the mechanics of trade.
He discusses verses that explicitly mention God subjugating rivers and ships for human use. And again, we aren't just talking about ancient history here.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Even with all our modern aviation, Amazon Prime, cargo planes, something like 90% of global trade is still maritime.
90%. The modern container ship economy is the absolute lifeblood of the dunya.
Yeah, without navigable waterways, the whole thing stops.
And the text emphasizes the volatility of the ocean, highlighting that these waters could easily have been made too treacherous to sail. Without them, the entire global system of import and export collapses overnight.
Which beautifully introduces our second major economic term from the lecture thamar, which is sometimes pronounced samar.
Right.
And the literal translation of that is fruits.
But again, the economic lens demands we look way past the agricultural translation.
So what does it mean in this context?
Tamar, in the Quranic vocabulary, represents the broader concept of investments, human resource development, services, and the maturation of business models.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. When you apply this lens, an ancient farmer planting an orchard isn't just a guy out there with a shovel. He's essentially engaging in the original form of venture capitalism.
A venture capitalist. Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that analogy. How does a citrus grove equate to Silicon Valley?
Okay, think about the life cycle. First, you plant a seed that is your initial seed funding. It's your unrecoverable capital investment.
Right, the money is in the ground.
Literally in the ground. Then you enter this agonizing development phase where you are pouring water, fertilizer, and physical labor into the dirt, but you're seeing zero immediate return.
Just burning through cash.
Exactly. You're just burning through cash to build the product. Then finally, the fruit appears. But here is the kicker, and this is where it gets stressful. You have an incredibly strict, unforgiving timeline.
The harvest window.
Yes. If you don't harvest and sell that fruit immediately, it spoils. That is your go-to-market strategy. If you miss your market window, your product is rotten, your capital is totally gone, and the startup fails.
Okay, I see where you're going with this, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Bring it on.
A modern tech startup utilizes incredibly complex risk algorithms, global market research, and agile pivoting. An ancient farmer is largely just at the mercy of the elements, hoping it rains. Isn't conflating the two a bit of a stretch?
I would argue the core mechanism of managing risk is identical.
How so?
The ancient farmer isn't just passively waiting around. He's actively building irrigation trenches. He's managing pest control. He has to hire seasonal labor precisely when that tight harvest window opens.
That's true.
He is managing extreme operational risk. And if he succeeds, as the lecturer points out, that successful fruit creates a franchise. It creates jobs for the pickers, the transporters, the local market vendors. It sparks an entire microeconomy.
Okay, that is a really fair point, and it perfectly aligns with the text's emphasis on the fragility of timing.
It's all about timing.
Tamar represents the intersection of divine provision and human execution. The opportunity, the seed, the soil, the market gap that is provided.
Right.
But it requires human effort, serious risk management, and precise timing to actually extract the value from it.
Okay, so we have the raw provision, which is risk. We have the investment and execution, which is tamar. That naturally moves us to the outcome of a successful venture, bringing us to the third term he introduces.
Fadl.
Fadl, which translates to excess, bonus, or profit.
Exactly. So a successful crop yield that actually exceeds your family's immediate survival needs, that is fadl. A business quarter that closes with a high profit margin, that's fadl.
And this is exactly where the lecturer delivers a really sharp cultural critique. He takes aim at this very specific puritanical mindset that exists in a lot of religious communities.
The tendency to make the halal into haram.
Yes, taking things that are halal, meaning lawful and permitted, and culturally twisting them into being viewed as haram or forbidden.
It's so common.
He argues that the text actually expresses divine anger when people are shamed for seeking lawful profit.
Because it's basically the ascetic ideal run amok. There is this deeply ingrained assumption that true piety requires suffering, or at least like severe financial austerity.
Like you have to be poor to be holy.
Right. The idea is that if you are highly focused on scaling a business, optimizing supply chains, or generating wealth, your soul is somehow atrophying.
Yeah, he actually mimics that hyper-zealous guy at the mosque who corners a successful entrepreneur and says, you know, brother, why are you so obsessed with the dunya? You should be abandoning your business and spending all your time preparing for the afterlife.
We've all met that guy.
We really have.
Yeah.
And the lecture's rebuttal is essentially, who gave you the authority to declare God's provisions as spiritually toxic?
Exactly.
Iron, coal, lithium, agricultural land. Who dares to induce guilt in people for legally extracting and profiting from the resources that were deliberately placed here to be discovered?
To completely dismantle this ascetic mindset, he leverages what I think is the ultimate counterexample.
Hajj.
Hajj.
This part completely rewired my understanding of the pilgrimage, because Hajj is universally recognized as the absolute apex of spiritual devotion. You travel to Mecca, you strip away your designer clothes, your Rolex, your worldly status, and you put on the ihram. Those simple, unstitched white garments that are explicitly meant to mimic a burial shroud.
You are physically rehearsing for the Day of Judgment.
Symbolically, you are supposed to be leaving the dunya entirely behind. You are standing as an equal among millions, focused solely on the infinite.
Right. So logically, if there were ever a moment, a specific geographic and temporal space where the text should say, absolutely no business, no trading, focus strictly on the unseen,
It would definitely be Hajj.
it would be Hajj. But the lecturer points out that the Quran explicitly states the exact opposite.
Which is wild.
It directly addresses the pilgrims and says there is absolutely no sin upon you for seeking foul commercial profit from your Lord during the Hajj.
This raises an important question, though. How does haggling over the price of textiles or negotiating a trade contract not completely corrupt the spiritual purity of a pilgrimage where you are literally wearing your burial shroud?
It seems like a contradiction until we look at the historical realities of ancient travel.
Right. It wasn't just hopping on a plane.
Embarking on Hajj centuries ago wasn't a matter of booking a quick, direct flight. It was a grueling, dangerous expedition across continents that could take upwards of 6 months.
6 months. And you obviously can't just pack 6 months of freeze-dried meals onto a camel.
Precisely. Surviving a multi-month transnational journey required a highly robust economic strategy. You needed capital, but more importantly, you needed trade goods.
To barter and sell along the way.
You had to engage in commerce at various stops along the route just to fund your survival.
He joked about the utter foolishness of arriving in Mecca with immense spiritual zeal, but zero financial planning. Essentially saying, congratulations on completing your rituals perfectly, now you are going to starve to death in the street because you ignored the realities of the dunya.
The profound takeaway here is that logistical and financial planning is actually an integral component of taqwa.
And taqwa is the Arabic term for God consciousness or piety.
Right. Yes. The text famously states that the best provision to take on a journey is taqwa. But the lecturer highlights the dual nature of this command. Yes, absolutely pack your spiritual piety. But do not use piety as an excuse for basic incompetence.
Pack a business plan.
Pack your actual physical provisions. Graft a business plan. God consciousness means being fiercely responsible with the physical, economic reality you inhabit.
He brings this concept firmly into the modern era by comparing Hajj to massive industry trade expos.
I loved this comparison.
Think about things like the Consumer Electronics Show or massive defense contracting expos or even like Comic-Con.
Right, these huge gatherings.
Those events gather the elite of very specific industries. But Hajj, it gathers people from literally every single industry, across every socioeconomic class, from every nation on earth into one densely packed physical location.
By sheer demographic reality, it is the most potent networking event on the planet.
Millions of professionals converging.
And the text is actively communicating. Engage in your rituals, seek spiritual purification. But simultaneously, while you have this unprecedented access to a global population, seek fettle. Network, form international partnerships, sign contracts. The pursuit of macroeconomic expansion does not negate the spiritual validity of the gathering. They are meant to operate in tandem.
Think about the tawaf. You are circling the Kaaba, the most sacred structure in the Islamic paradigm. And what are you explicitly commanded to pray for while making those circuits?
Our Lord give us good in the dunya and good in the hereafter.
Right there, at the absolute epicenter of the religion, wearing a shroud, you are commanded to ask for worldly success. It is the ultimate rejection of that mosque versus money folder system we talked about earlier.
Which serves as the perfect bridge to the next massive concept in the lecture.
Right.
We've established that the pursuit of individual profit, or fadl, is sanctioned, but what happens when you scale that up? Does the text provide a blueprint for national or macroeconomic stability?
And this leads the lecturer into an intense analysis of Surah Al-Kahf, and specifically the story of Dhul Qarnayn.
Yes.
Okay, so Surah Al-Kahf translates to the cave, and the lecture makes a brilliant point about how this chapter is culturally utilized. It features a famous story of young men who flee a corrupt, oppressive society and literally hide in a cave to preserve their faith.
Right.
So the dominant restrictive takeaway for a lot of people is basically isolationism. They view the world as a giant landscape of fitna, trials, and temptations.
Everything is fitna.
Exactly. The corporate world is fitna, the stock market is fitna, secular universities are fitna. So the goal becomes finding your own modern cave to hide in and protect your pristine soul.
It's a deeply retreatist theology. Surrender the systems of the world to others and just focus entirely on your personal ritual purity.
But the lecturer masterfully contrasts that opening story with the narrative of Dhul Qarnayn that appears later in the exact same chapter.
And Dhul Qarnayn is a massively powerful leader.
Does he hide in a cave? Absolutely not. He operates on the world stage. He is presented as a man who travels to the very edges of civilization to establish a stable, functioning society.
This is where we get into the critical domino effect of market stability. The lecturer emphasizes that one of the most profound blessings a society can possess is economic equilibrium.
Stable commodity prices, robust employment, a secure middle class.
Because if those pillars fracture, the entire societal structure collapses. It is an unavoidable sequence.
Give us the sequence.
If financial markets crash or hyperinflation sets in, mass unemployment follows. When the working class cannot secure basic risks to feed their families, crime becomes a literal survival mechanism.
Right.
As crime skyrockets, political institutions lose legitimacy, leading to radicalization and the collapse of national security. You cannot foster a morally upright, peaceful, spiritual society if the underlying economic bedrock is in freefall.
So engineering market stability is not just a secular policy goal. It is presented as a divine mandate.
Exactly. And the methodology Dhul Qarnayn uses to achieve this is fascinating. The text says he was granted immense resources.
Now, someone infected with that cave mentality might say, "Praise be, I have resources. I will lock myself in my palace, read scripture, and live an austere life."
But Dhul Qarnayn took his capital and aggressively reinvested it.
He toward it.
No, he traveled to foreign, unfamiliar territories, encountered populations whose languages he didn't even speak, and engaged in massive joint venture infrastructure projects.
Specifically, building a massive metallurgical wall between two mountains to protect a vulnerable population from invaders.
There is a vital, easily overlooked detail the lecturer pulls from this regarding trade partnerships, though.
Oh, this is so good.
When Dhul Qarnayn is organizing this massive infrastructure project, the text gives absolutely zero indication that he demanded his labor force or his supply chain partners share his specific theology.
Right, he didn't issue a decree saying, "I will only sign contracts with engineers who perform my exact rituals."
Precisely. The text normalizes doing business across ideological lines, and the lecturer anchors this historically by pointing to the Battle of Badr.
Which was a critical military conflict in early Islamic history.
Right. Even while fighting for their very survival, the Prophet's forces purchased weapons and armor from Jewish tribes. In fact, both sides of the conflict were heavily reliant on the exact same local manufacturing base.
The principle is that trade is trade.
Provided the transaction itself is ethical, transparent, and mutually beneficial, the religious identity of your counterparty is not a barrier to commerce.
Which brings him to one of the most blistering cultural critiques in the entire lecture.
Oh yeah, she really goes in here.
He targets the hyperzealous parents who actively shame their peers for sending their children to secular universities to get degrees in STEM, business or medicine.
Rather than keeping them isolated in strictly religious seminaries studying Sharia or fiqh.
Yes, the mindset that views an MBA or a master's in civil engineering as a tragic surrender to the dunya. The argument is essentially, God won't ask about thermodynamics on the day of judgment, so why are you wasting your child's potential on it?
I love how passionately he dismantled this, and I really want to double down on it. Look at Dul-Qarnayn's wall.
Okay.
When he was tasked with saving an entire civilization by building an impenetrable barrier between two mountains, did he consult the fiqh rulings on ritual ablution?
Nope.
Did he solve the crisis by perfectly reciting theology? No. He used metallurgy.
He had to calculate the exact thermal dynamics to melt iron and copper to create a brass or bronze alloy that wouldn't rust.
He had to engineer the logistics to transport massive quantities of raw ore across rugged terrain.
He utilized hard, empirical, quote-unquote, secular science to fulfill a divine mandate.
If we synthesize his argument here, the conclusion is that the very concept of secular knowledge is a false dichotomy within this framework.
There's no secular versus sacred knowledge.
Right. All knowledge that yields utility, preserves life, or stabilizes society is inherently blessed. By artificially categorizing STEM, economics, and business administration as outside the realm of the sacred, religious communities have voluntarily sidelined themselves.
They've stepped off the court.
They have abdicated their role as architects of the global economy. They are choosing the cave while the text is literally commanding them to emulate Dul-Qarnayn.
That is such a profound reframing of education and career.
It really is.
Okay, so we've covered Rizq, Tamar, and Fadl. We've looked at Hajj as a trade summit, and Dul-Qarnayn as a macroeconomic stabilizer. Let's dive into the final stretch of the vocabulary lesson.
The lecture introduces two more terms that dictate our interaction with the material world, sabab and mata.
Okay, let's start with sabab.
Sabab translates roughly to means or resources. It's the raw materials and tools required to execute a vision. The text explicitly states God provided Dul-Qarnayn with the sabab for everything he needed.
But the lecturer quickly pivots to a verse in Surah Yasin to illustrate how humans are actually supposed to utilize these resources.
Yes.
The verse describes putting offspring, or the next generation, onto ships to traverse the sea. And this action is framed not as a necessary evil, but as a profound divine sign.
To grasp the real weight of this, you have to understand ancient demographics. Why would a family risk putting their child on a perilous maritime journey?
Wasn't for a gap year of self-discovery, that's for sure.
Definitely not. You put your child on a ship to send them from a stagnant rural village to a thriving metropolitan hub.
You sent them to Alexandria or Damascus or Rome.
Exactly. So they could apprentice under a master artisan, learn complex accounting, or enter the administrative class. You are risking their lives to integrate them into the global economy.
The text is explicitly celebrating urbanization and the aggressive pursuit of upward economic mobility.
And it scales beautifully into the modern era. The lecturer notes that the verse continues, mentioning that God created other things like it that they will ride.
He joked that while it might not specifically mean Jeff Bezos' space rockets,
it undeniably encompasses the modern infrastructure of Boeing 777s, bullet trains, and cargo planes.
The technological means of transportation evolve, but the divine encouragement to break out of localized thinking and seek global opportunity remains totally static.
Which leads us perfectly to the final and in many ways most nuanced economic term of the lecture, mata, M-A-T-A-A.
Mata. The lecturer defines mata as a fusion of two inseparable components, utility and enjoyment.
I am so fascinated by this concept. Walk me through how utility and enjoyment function together as a unified metric.
Okay, so utility is the bare functional capacity of an object to solve a problem.
Like a basic tool.
Right. A cheap, blocky, uncomfortable car possesses utility. It physically moves you from point A to point B.
Or a bland nutrient paste provides utility. It technically prevents starvation.
Exactly.
Okay.
But Mata insists that mere survival mechanics are insufficient. Enjoyment must be factored in. A beautifully engineered sports car with leather interiors provides utility, but it also delivers immense aesthetic and visceral enjoyment.
A perfectly crafted meal delivers protein, but it also delivers joy.
So I have to zero in on this because it's brilliant. What he is describing with Mata is the exact definition of modern user experience, or UX design.
UX design. Okay, I'm listening.
Think about the software on your phone. If you download a budgeting app that has perfect utility like, it tracks every penny flawlessly, but the interface is ugly, it crashes frequently, and the buttons are frustrating to click, What happens?
You delete it.
You delete it immediately. You immediately look for a competitor that offers the exact same utility, but is beautifully designed and satisfying to interact with.
I see the parallel. You're saying the text is arguing that the universe itself was programmed with a high standard of UX design.
Exactly. The creator didn't just provide the bare minimum utility. Fruit could have been engineered to be highly nutritious, but taste like wet cardboard.
Horses could have been strong, but visually grotesque.
Right. But the universe is saturated with aesthetics. God literally programmed UX into the fabric of reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, recognizing Mata serves to completely validate the human desire for aesthetics, luxury, and pleasure within the material world.
It systematically destroys the guilt associated with wanting a nicer home, a more beautifully designed car, or a high-end culinary experience.
The enjoyment of the material world is not a bug in the system meant to distract you. It is an explicitly designed feature.
And the lecturer applies this concept of Mata directly to modern infrastructure, specifically commercial real estate.
He references a really interesting verse about that.
He does. A verse that states, "There is no sin upon a person for entering uninhabited houses, because within them is Mata for you."
Now, uninhabited houses is the ancient terminology for commercial zones.
Places where people operate but do not sleep. Think about what that means today. A towering corporate high-rise, a sprawling shopping mall, a university campus, a massive industrial park. These are the engines of the dunya.
And the hyper-religious instinct is often to view these spaces with intense suspicion, to think, my spirituality is only safe in my home or in the mosque. The financial district is a place of spiritual decay.
But the text directly intervenes and says, do not feel guilty for entering these commercial zones. There is Mata utility and enjoyment, career advancement, and economic provision waiting for you inside.
It is a direct, unfiltered endorsement of participating in the commercial infrastructure of the modern world.
He caps off this section by bringing up Noah, prophet Nu. We usually think of Noah solely in the context of the flood and theological warnings.
Right, the guy with the boat.
Yeah. But the lecturer points out that Noah was trying to fundamentally shift the economic perspective of his people. He told them that God made the earth vast, specifically so they could travel its sprawling roads.
Noah was battling a localized, stagnant village mindset.
He was trying to instill a vision of globalization.
Because you cannot travel vast terrestrial networks without a sophisticated economic apparatus. If you are traversing the globe, you must figure out currency exchange, supply chain logistics, trade agreements, and cross-cultural communication.
By commanding them to travel the vast earth, Noah was demanding they build a globalized, economically integrated civilization.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a breath and synthesize the journey we've just taken through this ancient vocabulary.
We started with Rizq, moving way past the simple biology of rain to understand the profound fragility and interconnectedness of modern supply chains.
Then we explored Tamar, seeing the ancient farmer not just as an agrarian figure, but as an early venture capitalist managing burn rates, market windows, and operational risk.
We examined Fadl, completely dismantling the ascetic ideal and realizing that the pursuit of commercial profit is explicitly sanctioned even during the peak spiritual intensity of Hajj.
Hajj acting as the ultimate global networking event.
We look at the macroeconomic mandate of Dhul Qarnayn, proving that utilizing hard, empirical science to engineer market stability is actually a profound spiritual achievement.
And finally, Sabab and Mata, the divine endorsement of global mobility and the revelation that the universe was designed with exquisite UX, validating our pursuit of both utility and aesthetic joy.
It is an incredibly cohesive framework. It forcefully argues that engaging in commerce, refining logistics, and building infrastructure are not distractions from a spiritual life.
They are the active, necessary mechanisms for manifesting it.
I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a moment. Whether you are finalizing a massive corporate merger tomorrow morning, writing lines of code to improve an app's user interface, or literally just walking down the aisle of a grocery store deciding which imported produce to buy, these actions are not isolated from your core ethics.
They're a direct extension of them.
The spreadsheet is not the enemy of the soul. It is the canvas where your ethics are actually tested and proven.
I want to leave you with a lingering thought. We have spent centuries, particularly in the industrialized modern era, meticulously constructing a society that walls off the cutthroat machinery of the business world from the ethical and spiritual considerations of our private lives.
We treat them as fundamentally incompatible domains.
But if this ancient text, a framework that has organized the lives of billions, viewed global supply chains, macroeconomic stability, and user experience design as profound acts of divine worship, is our stubborn modern attempt to separate work and morality the exact reason why our current economic systems feel so deeply ruthless, anxiety-inducing, and ultimately unfulfilling?
If we dared to put the boardroom and the prayer mat back in the exact same room, maybe the blueprint of our daily lives wouldn't feel so fractured. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new lens to view your work, and we highly encourage you to keep exploring these concepts on your own. Until next time.